It's hate week, and who wins this game not just matters for 2025, but also for 2026.
And while it matters for 2026, I think for the Saints, it matters a lot more for 2025.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints, both part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in America, which means it's number one in the world, which means it's number one in the galaxy. And of course, this episode of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints is a crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code Locked On NFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. So if you do not know me, I am your humble host, Aaron Freeman, joined by the illustrious Ross Jackson. Ooh. I am, of course, hosting Locked On Falcons. Ross hosts Locked On Saints. And because of this crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks, we will break down this Week 18 season finale, hate week, between the Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints, talking about some keys to victory, which matchups we'll be focused on, and the big stories for each of these teams heading into this final week. But Ross, talking about this game, it has implications, not necessarily for playoff things or anything, but it's really about pride for both of these teams. Mm-hmm. But, potentially this game could have long-term ramifications depending on who wins this game. But why is it really, for the Saints, a game that is kind of a must-win for them in Week 18?
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. This has long-term ramifications. I'm sure you'll break that down here in a bit and how this impacts next year. But I think for New Orleans, this is all about right now for them. And I think that winning against the Atlanta Falcons in Atlanta and finishing up their season, it would be 4-2 within the division, which goes into a little bit of that future conversation. That is just the perfect sort of cherry on top, icing on the cake, if you will, for what has been a big-time momentum shift for this organization, for this team, for its fan base, and for the community. Saints are on a 4-game win streak. Things have not felt this good since the retirement of Drew Brees, maybe the stepping away of Sean Payton, right? Maybe early Jameis days, pain everywhere was maybe like the kind of the best that it's felt in a while. But for the past couple of years, that kind of joy, that kind of optimism, all of that has kind of been absent. And now it's here, and it's all because of first-year head coach and a rookie quarterback in Tyler Shough that have been kind of, setting the NFC South ablaze, setting the NFC ablaze so far, and playing some of the best football. I think both of these teams playing the best football in the division here late, and unfortunately neither are playing for a playoff spot. But I think it's just an icing on the cake moment. This is the Saints Super Bowl this year, in my opinion, is getting a win up against the Atlanta Falcons or chasing one.
Yeah. So we'll see if the Saints get up for this game. The Falcons coming off a very big win on Monday Night Football with the Rams. Usually they're due for a letdown sort of performance, and we'll see if they have that this weekend with this Saints team that's definitely going to be up for this. But as I mentioned at the top, this game has not only implications for, finishing strong in 2025, but also has potential implications for 2026. Because I'm looking at, the schedule, and whoever wins this game winds up finishing potentially in third place in the NFC South. There's a way for the Falcons to finish in second place, depending on what happens in that Carolina Bucs game. Well. But, that third place schedule potentially for whoever is the team in the NFC South, those three teams, for the most part, as we know, the schedule is pretty much locked in, but with a couple of variations. In that third place schedule, you got teams like Kansas City, Washington, and the Rams potentially next year. And then the fourth place schedule, you got the Raiders, the Giants, and the Cardinals. And now obviously projecting who's going to be good or not, this far out from next year is difficult. But I think it's probably a safe assumption, Ross, that one trio looks a little bit more formidable than the other trio, and that could have, potentially 2-3 game swing in terms of wins and losses. And if you're a team like the Falcons, who have a quarterback situation in flux, don't have a first-round pick in 2026, you may be finding yourself in the quarterback market in 2027. Maybe the Saints are another team that could be that. I think, obviously, we expect Tyler Shough to be the starter in 2026, at least from my perspective. But, if 2026 doesn't go certain way for the Saints. Maybe they're back in the quarterback market in 2027, and playing the harder schedule in 2026 potentially sets you up for greater success in 2027. So it's one of those things where you win the game, it's going to be harder for you in 2026, but potentially that makes it easier for you in 2027. So the outcome of this game could potentially affect either one of these teams for many years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And I think both these teams also have a pathway to second place, which could lead to games against like San Francisco and Dallas and others. And so I think looking at where and the Chargers, I think that looking at where both of these teams are, though, and especially what we've learned here in New Orleans, is that the thing that's most important to this organization is building a winning culture. And so build that winning culture now by winning games, and that's what carries you into, no matter who your opponents are in 2026, it carries you into a more at least successful standing in 2026, and a more successful standing in terms of being able to build in your offseason, right? Building a culture and a program that free agents want to be a part of, that rookies are excited to join, that some of your incumbent players will want to stick around for, all of that. I think those are all the things that the Saints are thinking about before they're super concerned about the schedule, though they do have a first round pick to be worried about when it comes to positioning, but they can't fall very far from where they are at pick number 8 overall at the moment. So not a terrible situation for them. I also think the other reason, Aaron, why the Saints are likely to kind of get up for this game, it could be Cam Jordan's last game against the Atlanta Falcons. It could be Taysom Hill's final game against the Atlanta Falcons. There's a world in which this is, I don't believe it will be, but there's a world in which this is Demario Davis's last game against the Falcons. I think he'll be back, and I think Cam will probably be back. I'm not so sure about Taysom, but for those three guys, you never know how negotiations are going to go, what agent does this and all that. Like, it's not the player talking to the organization when it comes to those contracts, right? There's other people that are working on all that. And so you never know how those conversations are going to go. I think it's going to be another big time motivating factor for this team to try to make sure that those guys, if it is their last, foray in the black and gold, and especially their last opportunity against the team's biggest rival, and in Cam Jordan's career, the only rival that he's ever faced, I think that's another reason why you can see this team very much be motivated to get a win here, regardless of what it means for their schedule next year.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not going to miss any of those guys that you named. Should this be their final hate week? But, we're talking about motivation, right? And, talking about the long-term implications of this game and the outcome. But there are also short-term implications for the Falcons, right? Because they're coming off that big win against the Rams. And they can't really afford to lose this game because, coaching staff is on the hot seat, right? No one knows if Raheem Morris and company are going to be back. Terry Fontenot maybe rejoining Mickey Loomis if he loses the GM spot here in Atlanta after the season.
He's been with Mickey Loomis the entire time. It's a sleeper agent. It's been a whole thing. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah. That's not the first time I've heard that one. That has been mentioned many, many times here on Locked Up Falcons, certain sleeper agents. But, I personally tend to believe that the Falcons have already kind of made their decision in terms of what's the fate of both of those guys. But if there's any chance of either of them sticking around, they kind of have to win this game, because I can't imagine a scenario where they lose this game and both of those guys are back in 2026. So obviously a lot of short-term ramifications, potential long-term ramifications. We'll see how it all plays out this coming Sunday, but certainly there's going to be some critical matchups that either team will need to take care of and win, and we'll be keeping our eye on some of those and break those down as we continue today's Crossover Thursday, presented by PrizePicks. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and ETFs, options and futures, and crypto, all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself, expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. So continuing today's Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks, want to let you guys know about the Everydayer Club. We thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints. You're the reason why Locked On is #1 sports podcast network in the galaxy. And we want to give back to you by giving you this opportunity to level up your everydayerness by joining either the Locked On Falcons or Locked On Saints Everydayer Club at the link in the description below at lockedonfalcons.supercast.com or lockedonsaints.supercast.com. And of course, if you want to check it out, it's $5 a month, $50 a year. And if you want to level up to even further and get even greater perks, like, ad-free versions, as well as ad-free versions of both shows, as well as, Discord access, you can check out Locked On Saints All Access for a few dollars more. Again, find out all the perks you get with that at the links in the description below. So, Ross, let's get into some of these key matchups. And for me, the first one that looks that jumps off the screen is none other than the player that jumps off the screen. That's Bijan Robinson, who's coming off a monster game against the Rams. He needs 255 scrimmage yards in this game to break the all-time record set by Chris Johnson way back in, I believe, 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. And that would be a career high for him. The most he's ever gotten earlier this season was 238 against the Bills. He had 225 last week against the Rams. So, maybe he's due for another 250-plus type of game. And so, obviously all focus is going to be on Bijan Robinson given his play. And so to me, one of the questions I have is who else is going to emerge? Because I don't know if it's going to be the one-man show that it was against the Rams on Monday night. You're going to need Drake London. You're going to need Kyle Pitts, guys that were not impactful in that previous matchup against the Saints. Obviously, Drake London did not play in that game.
Right.
And he's been dealing with injuries and has come back the last couple of weeks and has been virtually a non-factor. Will he be a bigger factor in this game? He's never caught a touchdown against the New Orleans Saints in his NFL career. Be a great opportunity for him to get his first one.
Yeah, that's going to be a big one for sure. I'm looking at how the Saints coverage kind of tries to match up there. I mean, dealing with, and I think Kyle Pitts has kind of had a little bit of a resurgence here towards the end of the season as well. And I think just figuring out sort of where these guys are able to match up well. We saw some of the miscommunications that we haven't really seen since the beginning of the season. It's a really young Saints secondary. We saw that kind of creep up in Tennessee. Do the Saints get that adjusted? Do they get that fixed? Defensive coordinator Brandon Staley's done a fantastic job with this team. They're a top 5 passing defense so far this year. They're one of the best scoring and total defenses since week 10. Can they keep that up going up against the Atlanta Falcons? They struggled a bit last week with Cam Ward, who obviously is a lot more mobile and a little bit more playmaker-ish than Kirk Cousins, but they struggled against Kirk Cousins weeks ago. I mean, I think the Atlanta Falcons were really the last team to make the Saints look like they weren't a good team. Since then, they've looked much better, but it was this Falcons team that humbled them the last time that they met. And I think those other pass catchers, those other contributors alongside obviously the big time impact of Bijan Robinson is going to be huge for sure in this game. And so the way that the Saints match up there is going to be very, very impactful. It could be the most important part of this game.
Yeah. The Falcons, I think, caught the Saints sleeping a little bit because they broke some tendencies in that game by utilizing under center play action really for the first time. And I think that caught the Saints sleeping. I don't think they'll be able to catch them sleeping. And so I do think they'll need a much more traditional passing attack if they're going to attack the Saints defense that has, as you mentioned, been playing really good football. I believe they're like 4th in expected points added over the last 6 or so weeks since their bye week, since that Falcons game. So certainly a team that the defense looks like it's getting back to where it had traditionally been for many, many years under Dennis Allen. But, looking at the Falcons defense going up against this Saints offense, that was a big part of the Falcons' success in that previous matchup, was that the Falcons were able to control the line of scrimmage with a 4-man pass rush. And will they be able to have success doing that again? I know that was Cesar Ruiz's one of his worst games he's played this season, going up against this Falcons front.
And that's saying something.
He's dealing with some injuries at this point in time. So it's even potentially a more favorable matchup should he miss this game. And, you did not have Fuaga in that game, and the Falcons were able to take advantage of Asim Richards. You will have Fuaga presumably in this game.
Yes.
And so how does that sort of impact the potential for the Falcons to get pressure on Tyler Shough and get to be able to pin their ears back against him?
Yeah, it's going to be massive. I mean, obviously, the interior of the Saints offensive line is completely beat up, and Cesar Ruiz has not played a stellar brand of football, to say the least, here in 2026 or 2025. Well, it will be 2026 by the time this game happens. It is 2026 now. Goodness gracious. But then, so getting him back in the lineup feels good, but is it really going to help the Saints out? We don't really know. And the Saints might be down Dylan Radins, the starting left guard that took over after Trevor Penning was traded away at the trade deadline as well. And so you might still have a backup's backup in one of those two positions on the interior anyway. And of course, already a backup center. So I think the interior is going to be really important. They love to leave Kelvin Banks Jr. at left tackle, the rookie out of Texas, as well as Talayasi Fuanga, who you mentioned a second ago, at right tackle. They love leaving those guys out on an island, not giving them help, not giving them chips, not giving them a tight end to help them out, all those other things. And so it's going to be up to them to try to eliminate as much of the edge pass rush as possible. But the interior pass rush is still going to be a big part of it. And then all of that comes into play in the run game as well. Are you going to be able to get the push that the Saints were able to get in the second half up against the Tennessee Titans to actually be able to run the football a bit, which I think would help them out a ton with trying to let their offense be their best defense up against the Falcons and Bijan Robinson?
Well, fortunately for the Saints, the Falcons do not have a Jeffrey Simmons that can create havoc on the interior. And
which, by the way, they eventually just started triple teaming him last week. Like they basically just said, you know what, no more him.
I noticed that. Yeah, it was just like, okay, we're not gonna let this guy wreck the game. And unfortunately for the Falcons, they're not going to be with their best interior pass rusher, which is Brandon Dorlus. He suffered a hamstring/knee injury last week, and will miss this game. And so that interior Saints O-line may not look as vulnerable unless you can get, David Onyemata finding the fountain of youth and Rukaroro stepping up in a major way. I think Caden Ellis will be a big part of the Falcons' attempts to try to create that interior pressure with some of those A-gap blitzes, up the middle. But Ross, are there any other matchups that you have your eyes on heading into Sunday's game?
Yeah, going back to Saints offense versus the Falcons defense, I'm really watching Tyler Shough versus that stellar tandem of safeties that Atlanta has on that defense. Jessie Bates, the third, as well as Xavier Watts. I loved Xavier Watts in this year's draft. I really like Jonas Sanker as well, who the Saints took. I think it was like 3 picks ahead of Watts. But of course, Watts did a stellar game on Monday night, a couple of interceptions, and just played extremely well. And look, the thing that has made Tyler Shough so effective has been the deep ball, right? His ability to be able to attack 10 plus yards downfield right now amongst all quarterbacks that have started at least 6 games. He's number 6 on that list in terms of passing yards per game, 10 or more air yards downfield. So he loves being able to attack deep. But are you going to be able to do it against this tandem of safeties? Are you going to be able to do some of the things that Tyler Shough has done very well against lesser safeties in terms of looking them off or freezing them in the middle of the field? You're going to have a tougher time doing that to a Jessie Bates. You're going to have a tougher time doing that to a guy that's instinctive and so athletic like Xavier Watts. And so I'm watching that matchup, of course. And then just for the Saints defense up against the Falcons offense, included in, limiting those potential playmakers over for Atlanta. One big piece to that is going to be the pass rush for New Orleans. And so I'm watching for Chase Young up against the left tackle there, and Jake Matthews, right? That's still there at that left tackle. And those guys matching up and can Chase Young, who has had a career year here in New Orleans in Brandon Staley's defense, can he keep it going for one more game?
Yeah. Been a very disruptive player these last couple of weeks, Chase Young. I was impressed with Jake Matthews' ability to hold up against Jared Verse. And he'll get another challenge this week against Chase Young, who he's had some good games against and he's had some bad games against. So that will be a key matchup. But we'll wrap up today's Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks talking about one thing that we want to see each of these teams do on Sunday. And if they do it, they will probably walk away with a win, and we'll do that to wrap up today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Whether you're starting a new routine, especially this time of year as we kick off 2026, these new routines often can feel like a challenge. But with PrizePicks, it always feels good to be right. It's easy to start a new routine, whether you're playing player projections for the first time with high pressure football matchups every weekend or elite hoops action almost every single night. The action never slows down this year, and PrizePicks allows you to stay in control. It's so easy. It's the daily fantasy app that lets you build lineups based off of player projections. No drafts, no waiting. Just pick more or less and play your way. And you can play so many different ways. And you have a huge range of unique stats to choose from: yards, fantasy score, 3 points made, whatever fits your strategy. So download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it is good to be right. Wrapping up today's Crossover Thursday presented by PrizePicks, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints. Ross, let's talk keys to victory. What is one thing that the Saints need to do in order to walk away from a win this Sunday?
Yeah, look, I'll say this. I think that there are a lot of things that they're going to have to do to get a win. But I think maybe the thing that's going to be most important, I think Kellen Moore needs to flip the script a little bit. This is a little bit different than what we talked about before. But I've been thinking about it. I think he needs to flip the script. I think back to, look, before he was the Saints head coach, right? He was a Super Bowl winning offensive coordinator with the Philadelphia Eagles. How did he win that Super Bowl? He won that Super Bowl by changing everything that was the Philadelphia Eagles. He turned Jalen Hurts into a downfield passer, a downfield threat. It was one of his best downfield games of the season. And so the Saints have now made a brand, and that's after the Eagles made a brand of themselves through Saquon Barkley and through Jalen Hurts as a rusher. Jalen Hurts had the fewest passing attempts in 2024. And so I think this week, Kellen Moore has an opportunity to try to flip the script a little bit. And they are a team that has now, on offense, New Orleans, made their bread and butter by attacking deep. If they're not able to do that because of, like we just talked about, those great safeties, and then, I didn't want to leave A.J. Terrell out of the conversation as well, outstanding corner. I think being able to flip the script on its head a little bit and win with the run game in a way that we haven't seen the Saints do, but they might have figured something out in the second half against Tennessee with Audric Estime. If they're able to do that, I think that could be the Saints version of what the Falcons did to the Saints the first time that they met, and their ability to be able to kind of catch the Falcons sleeping a little bit by rebranding what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they're executing it over on the offensive side. I really think that, look, strong defense, all this other stuff, playing into the fourth quarter, all that's obvious, right? There's the typical keys to victory, but I think maybe challenging and breaking tendencies in this game. You have nothing to hide going into the playoffs, right? This is a perfect time to kind of turn the tables a little bit and be something that you haven't shown that you can be so far this year.
Yeah, I think that's a great point there. And we'll see if they can maybe break some tendencies there and as you say, catch the Falcons sleeping a little bit in this matchup. Now, for me, when I look at this game, as you mentioned, there are lots of things that can help either one of these teams win the game. But to me, the one thing that kind of stands out to me is the Falcons have to kind of break even in the third quarter, right? The Saints are one of the worst first quarter teams, but they're one of the best fourth quarter teams. So you kind of expect the Falcons get off to a fast start. You kind of expect the Saints to finish this game strong. And the Falcons have really struggled in the third quarter this year. They're one of the worst teams in the NFL in third quarter. I think they're like 29th in point differential. It just feels like every single game, every single week, they get off to a reasonable first half performance, and then it all falls apart in the third quarter. And so I'm not expecting the Falcons to win the third quarter. I expect the Falcons just to break even. Don't lose it in a disastrous way where you're getting outscored by like 3 scores in the third quarter. Just like break even. If it can be like a 7-7 sort of third quarter, I think if the Falcons get off to a fast start and with how the Saints will finish in all likelihood scoring a bunch of points in the fourth quarter, that should be enough to sort of allow the Falcons to walk away with a win and hold on for dear life in the second half, where this team typically has not performed well. So just break even in the third quarter and they should be fine.
That's really good. Yeah, the Saints only have I think it's a +2 point margin in the third quarter. It's really all about the fourth quarter for them. You're absolutely right. The Saints have struggled in scripted situations early, the first 15 plays in each half. Typically haven't really amounted to much for them. That changed a little bit last week with the second half, but is that is that the new norm, or was that just the exception? It feels like it was just the exception. And Tyler Shough right now leads the NFL in most fourth quarter passing yards amongst quarterbacks with at least 6 starts. And so per game, excuse me. And so I think you're absolutely right. That has to be a big part of what this game is for both these teams, is who shows up best in the second half and, sets themselves up for success by the time that the game is done. That's going to be a really fun piece to watch. It'd be interesting. Like, who wins the third quarter potentially wins this game. That'll be a very interesting early indicator.
Yeah, definitely. Now, a last little tidbit. Special teams is going to matter in this game because both of these teams have terrible special teams.
Terrible.
And so it's like you're just going to be slightly less terrible than the other team's special teams in order to win this game. Right now, I think the Falcons are 30th in DVOA on special teams. According to FT and Fantasy, the Saints are 31st. So the Falcons are going to fire their special teams coordinator regardless of what happens with Raheem Morris at the end of the season. But this is just like at least one opportunity for him to get a very little W if he can just slightly be less bad as the Saints special teams.
Set himself up for his next job. Like, hey, but I finished strong. I think you're absolutely right. The Saints have one of the worst punters in the NFL. And look, they made a change at kicker. They're better off at kicker now than they were the last time that these two teams met, exchanging Blake Grupe for the Irishman and Charlie Smith, who 27 months ago was an English school teacher in Ireland, and now all of a sudden is an NFL kicker. And he has been outstanding for New Orleans so far. And so, if it's going to be the difference between, a 2-point game, a 3-point game, or anything, I feel better for the Saints now in this situation with this kicker than I did in their previous matchup. But, it's always so unpredictable, man. You just never know. Know, especially with the special teams game.
Ross, is there anything you want to share with the listeners before we duck out of here?
Just massive appreciation for the continued support. It's Saints and Falcons hate week, but it's not Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints hate week. Aaron and I always talk about that. We very much enjoy each other. We very much enjoy getting to do these shows, and we're very grateful for being able to kick off a new year together with all of you. I'm sure I'm speaking for you now, but definitely a sentiment I wanted to share.
Well, Ross, I'm sorry to break it to you that I have to break it to. I hate no, I'm kidding. Yes.
You've always been the worst, Ross.
I despise you. I am hopeful that this is the last time I ever have to watch Cam Jordan, Taysom Hill, and Demario Davis play against the Atlanta Falcons. I'm waiting for Mike Evans and Levante David to retire. These guys have been, thorn in my side for many, many years, watching them wreck the Falcons over these last decade or so. So hopefully, we'll get these guys out the paint and end it in a negative way where they go outside. I don't know.
I think those two defensive guys at least will be back, but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. So, guys, we will be breaking it down the rest of the week, heading into this Week 18 matchup. So continue to make it Locked On Falcons and Locked On Saints your first listen on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Of course, check out Locked On NFL for your second listen to get all the scoop on the latest around the NFL in Week 18, setting up playoff implications, seeding, all that stuff that is available for you. And of course, make sure you check out the Everydayer Club if you're interested in leveling up your everydayerness by checking out the links in the description below at Locked On Saints and LockedOnFalcons.supercast.com. Again, $5 a month, $50 a year. And for a couple bucks more, you can get, Locked On Saints all access, and you'll get incredible perks. And you'll get to see Ross in his clean-shaven face all the time. It's completely throwing off, I'm sure, a large swath.
So many people.
New year, new Ross, as we said. So
happy New Beard, everybody. It's growing back. Don't worry.
Yeah, guys, go check it out, of course, in the link in the description below. That's going to do it for us here on this Crossover Thursday, presented by Prize Picks for Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints and myself, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons. Your team every day.